James Whitfield arrives at Westminster Hall at 4:37 in the morning. He knows the exact time because he checked his watch the moment the taxi pulled away and left him standing alone on Parliament Square, and he has not stopped thinking about that number since. 4:37. 38 years ago, almost to the month, he stood at a different position at a different ceremony in this same city and did not check his watch once. He did not need to. Time, when you are a serving Coldstream Guard, is not something you track. It is something you become. He is not serving anymore. He retired 11 years ago with the rank of lieutenant colonel, a bad left knee, and a regimental tie he wears to funerals. Tonight he is wearing it. He is here not as a soldier but as an observer, invited by a former colleague now sitting on the ceremonial planning committee, to walk the route, speak to the teams, and write something for the regimental journal about what this moment means. 250,000 people are expected. The queue is already forming somewhere behind him, snaking through the cold London dark like a river that has forgotten where it is going. He stops at the entrance to Westminster Hall and looks up. There is something about this building that does what very few buildings in the world can do. It makes you feel genuinely small without making you feel insignificant. The hammer-beam roof, 700 years old, holds the dark above you like cupped hands. The stone floor, worn to a soft shine by centuries of feet, catches the light from the standing lamps that have been positioned around the catafalque at the center of the hall. And at the four corners of that catafalque, motionless as the stonework itself, stand four members of the household division in full ceremonial dress. James stops walking. He has seen this formation in photographs. He has read the briefing documents. He has spoken to 3 different officers in the past week about the rotation schedule, the physical demands, the psychological preparation. He thought he understood what he was going to see. He did not understand what he was going to see. There is a difference, he will tell you, between knowing that a thing is difficult and watching a human being do a difficult thing in complete silence at 4:41 in the morning with no audience yet, and no applause coming and no end in sight. The 4 guards at the corners of the coffin are not performing stillness. They are inhabiting it. Their eyes are open and fixed at a point somewhere above and beyond the hall's entrance. Their hands rest on the reversed rifles. Their faces carry the particular expression that James spent years trying to teach young recruits and mostly failed. Not blankness, not hardness, but a kind of absolute interior quiet that looks, from the outside, like it costs nothing and costs, from the inside, absolutely everything. He stands there for 4 minutes without moving. Then a junior press liaison officer named Claire touches him gently on the elbow and asks if he would like a coffee before the public doors open, and he says yes, and the spell breaks, and he follows her out into the corridor. "How long have they been standing?" he asks. "That rotation started at 4, she says. "They'll go until when?" 6. He does the arithmetic. 2 hours at the corner of that coffin. 2 hours in that silence, in that stillness, in that hall, in that dark, before a single member of the public has even walked through the door. He wraps both hands around the coffee cup and says nothing. Outside in the cold, the queue is already 3 miles long. The doors open at 5 in the morning. James positions himself just inside the hall entrance, slightly to the left, close enough to observe but far enough to be invisible, a habit from decades of wanting to understand what an exercise looks like from the position of the person who is not in charge of it. He has a small notebook. He does not open it for the first 40 minutes. There is too much to watch. The first people through the door are not what he expected. He had imagined, in some vague way, that the early queue would be full of a particular type of mourner, organized, prepared, perhaps slightly performative in their grief, the kind of people who arrive first at things because arriving first is itself a statement. Instead, the first woman through the door is somewhere in her mid-70s, wearing a rain jacket over what appears to be pajamas, clutching a small bunch of flowers she has clearly been holding since before dawn because the stems are crushed and the petals have begun to soften. She walks in, sees the catafalque, stops completely, and puts one hand over her mouth. She stands like that for a long time. The guards do not move. This is the thing James finds himself returning to over and over in the hours that follow. Not the crowd's grief, which is visible and various and sometimes startling in its intensity, but the guard's response to that grief, which is not a response at all. It is a condition. It is a state of being that the crowd moves through and around and past, like water moving around 4 stones in a river. The stones do not react to the water. The water does not ask them to. But the water keeps trying. He notices it first around 7 in the morning when the hall begins to fill properly, and the sound of footsteps and muffled crying creates a constant low texture of noise. A small boy, perhaps 6 years old, being carried by his father, leans out from his father's arms as they pass the nearest guard and stares directly into the guard's face from a distance of perhaps 18 inches. The boy stares. The guard does not blink. The boy stares harder. The guard does not blink. The boy turns to his father and says, in a voice that carries clearly across the hall, "Dad, he's not real." The father whispers something corrective and moves on. The guard does not blink. 3 rows behind them, James hears a woman suppress a laugh, and then immediately feel guilty about it, and then not quite manage to feel guilty enough to stop her shoulders from shaking. He writes something in his notebook. He spends the rest of the morning walking slowly up and down the length of the hall, watching from different angles, different distances. He watches the guards from 50 feet, from 20, from directly alongside, where the angle lets him see the slight rise and fall of a chest, the only evidence available that what stands at the corner of that coffin is a living person, and not, as the 6-year-old suspected, something else entirely. He stops beside a man in his 50s, flat cap, work coat, the specific posture of someone who has not cried in a very long time and is currently losing the argument with himself about whether he is going to start now. The man looks at the nearest guard for a long moment. "How do they do it?" the man says, not to James, to no one, to the hall. James considers answering. He decides not to. Some questions are better left in the air they were asked in. He keeps walking. At 11:15, he steps outside for 20 minutes and stands on the embankment in the thin autumn sunlight. The queue behind him stretches further than he can see. People have brought folding chairs. People have brought flasks and sandwiches. People are sleeping against lamp posts with their coats pulled up around their ears, waiting for a door that will not open for hours yet. He watches them and thinks, not for the first time this morning, that grief is one of the only things left in public life that strips away every other consideration and leaves only the bare fact of what a person actually feels. He goes back inside. The guards at the corners have changed. New faces, same stillness. The hall does not notice the difference. The hall is the same. The stones are the same. The light is the same. The water keeps moving. Her name is Sarah Ackhaffer, and she is 23 years old, and this is the first lying-in state she has ever stood vigil at. And she will tell you, if you catch her in the corridor outside the hall during her rotation break, sitting on a folding chair with her boots unlaced and both hands wrapped around a cup of tea she has not yet drunk, she will tell you that nothing in training fully prepares you for the sound. "What sound?" James asks. She thinks about it. "All of it," she says. "The crying, the whispering, the shoes, the children, all of it at once, all the time, and you're just there, in the middle of it, and you can't." She stops, starts again. "You process it later. You have to put it somewhere and process it later. While you're standing, you can't let yourself actually hear it. You hear it, but you can't hear it. Do you know what I mean?" James knows exactly what she means. He spent 6 years as a serving ceremonial guard before moving into training and command roles, and the particular mental discipline she is describing, the ability to receive sensation without reacting to it, to be simultaneously present and sealed, is not something that can be explained to someone who has not done it. It can barely be explained to someone who has. "When did you come off rotation?" he asks. 20 minutes ago. And when do you go back? 40 minutes. She drinks the tea. It is clearly cold. She drinks it anyway, like someone who has been very thirsty for a long time and has only just remembered. First time is the hardest, James offers. She looks at him. Is the second time easier? He thinks about it honestly. No, he says, but you know you can do it, that's different. She nods, she laces her boots back up. She goes back in. Raymond Catchpole is 61 years old and has been a yeoman warder at the Tower of London for 9 years. But before that he spent 22 years in the Grenadier Guards. And before that he grew up in a small terraced house in Wolverhampton, where his mother kept a photograph of the Queen's coronation cut from a newspaper pinned above the kitchen door. He is not on official duty today. He came on his day off. He is standing in the public queue. James finds him by accident, recognizes the regimental bearing before he registers the face, the particular way that former guards stand even in civilian clothes, weight distributed, shoulders back, not stiff exactly but organized, as if the body remembers what the mind has officially retired from. They talk for 12 minutes in the slow shuffle of the queue. I stood vigil at the coronation, Raymond says. Not in here, outside, on the Mall. But I was in position for 4 hours and I remember every single minute of it, which is strange because I can't remember what I had for breakfast last Tuesday. What do you remember? The smell of the crowd, he says without hesitation. That many people in one place in the rain, it has a particular smell. And the sound of them going quiet. That was, he pauses. That was something. 50,000 people going quiet all at once. It takes a moment. It's not immediate. It's like a wave. One side goes quiet and then it moves across and then nothing. Just the rain. He is quiet for a moment. She was good to us, he says finally. The regiment, over the years, she knew what it meant to us, what it costs. He nods toward the hall entrance. Those boys and girls in there, she would have known what it costs them. James writes nothing in his notebook during this conversation. Some things you keep. Her name, he learns later from Claire the press liaison, is Margaret Ellison, and she is 44 years old, and she is a primary school teacher from Dorchester. And she drove to London at 2 in the morning and joined the queue and waited 9 hours to walk through Westminster Hall. And just before she reached the nearest guard she stopped, leaned slightly toward him, close enough that a nearby security officer shifted his weight and whispered something. James is not close enough to hear what she says. No one is. The guard does not move, does not blink, does not acknowledge her in any visible way. She straightens up. She looks at the guard's face for a long moment. Then she nods once slowly as if he has answered her and she walks on. James catches up with her outside, on the embankment where she is standing with both hands on the railing looking at the river. Do you mind if I ask, he says, what you said to him? She looks at him sideways, a stranger. She decides something. I said thank you, she says, for standing there, for doing that. I know he couldn't, I know they can't respond. But I wanted to say it to a face, not just, she gestures vaguely at the air. Not just into a room. Do you think he heard you? She looks back at the river. I think they hear everything, she says. That's the whole point, isn't it? They hear everything and they stand there anyway. She picks up her bag and walks toward the tube. James stays at the railing for a while. The American tourist's name is Dale Hoffman, and he is from Akron, Ohio, and he is on a 2-week European holiday with his wife Brenda and their adult son Tyler. And he has already, by his own account, visited the Tower of London, Buckingham Palace, the Churchill War Rooms, and a pub in Soho where he had something called a Scotch egg, and is still uncertain how he feels about it. James encounters the Hoffman family near the hall entrance at around 3 in the afternoon, where Dale is explaining to Tyler with complete confidence that the guards are some kind of wax figure display they set up for the occasion. Dale, Brenda says. Brenda, look at him. He has not moved. Dale, he is a person. I'm not saying he's not a person. I'm saying right now he is functionally a statue. There is a difference. There is not a difference, Dale. Tyler, who is approximately 25 and has the specific exhausted expression of a young man who has been on holiday with his parents for 11 days, notices James standing nearby and says, "Excuse me, sir, they're real, right? Like actual people." "They are," James confirms. Dale looks at James, then at the guard, then back at James. "How long has he been standing there?" "That rotation started about an hour ago. He'll go for another hour." "Standing like that, not moving." "Not moving." Dale stares at the guard with an expression that James will later describe in his notebook as the precise face a man makes when everything he thought he understood about human capability turns out to be wrong. "Brenda," Dale says quietly, "we need to come back tomorrow." "We have the British Museum tomorrow, Dale." "The British Museum will still be there. I need to understand how this man is doing what he is doing." Brenda looks at James. James looks at Brenda. A moment of pure international solidarity passes between them. "It was very nice to meet you," James says and moves on. It begins, as most things in England begin, with absolute politeness and then escalates. The attempts to make a guard react are not, James wants to be clear, malicious. They are almost never malicious. They are the entirely human response to witnessing something that appears to violate the rules of normal human behavior. When you see a person standing so still, for so long with so much happening around them, there is a part of your brain that simply refuses to accept it at face value. It sends a signal. The signal says, "Test it." The first category is what James privately labels the talkers. These are people who speak to the guards directly, not to say thank you like Margaret Ellison, but to prompt, to coax, to cajole. He witnesses several iterations of this across the 4 days. A man in a pinstripe suit who leans in and says, "Tremendous job, tremendous," in a loud, encouraging voice, as if the guard is a child who has just completed a spelling test. A teenager who asks, "What's your name, mate?" with genuine, friendly curiosity, and then, receiving no answer, asks it again slightly louder, and then a third time, and then is gently redirected by his mother. A woman who tries the approach of simply narrating what is happening. "We've come from Edinburgh," she says conversationally to the guard's left ear. "Drove down this morning, 7 hours. Can you imagine? And the car park prices here are absolutely criminal." And maintains a steady flow of information for approximately 45 seconds before her companion pulls her away. The guards receive all of this, process none of it, give nothing back. The second category is the photographers. These are people who position themselves as close as the perimeter allows and attempt to take a photograph at the precise moment a guard blinks, as if catching the blink will somehow prove something, crack something open, reveal the human machinery beneath the ceremonial exterior. James watches a man spend 11 minutes. He checks his watch. 11 minutes adjusting his phone angle, waiting for a blink, and finally leaving in what appears to be genuine frustration. Another woman takes 47 photographs in rapid succession and reviews them with the focused intensity of a forensic scientist. And James does not know what she finds in them, but she lingers for a long time on one particular image, and her expression changes, and she puts her phone in her pocket and does not take it out again. The third category is the emotionally unexpected. These are not attempts to provoke. They are moments where the crowd's genuine feeling collides directly with a guard's professional stillness in a way that creates something that is not quite grief and not quite theater, but is somehow both at once. A man who begins crying very suddenly and very loudly, 3 feet from the nearest guard, and then becomes embarrassed about the loudness of his crying and tries to make himself quieter, and cannot. And the guard stands in the storm of it without flinching, and somehow the guard's stillness makes the man cry harder, and somehow that is exactly right. A small girl who places a single flower on the floor directly at a guard's feet and then curtsies. A real curtsy, unprompted, perfectly executed, as if she has been practicing. And the guard does not look down and does not move, and the flower stays there. And the girl walks away holding her mother's hand with the particular satisfaction of someone who has paid a debt. James writes 3 pages of notes during these days. He also tears out 1 page and puts it in his coat pocket. Some observations are for the journal, some are for himself. And then there is Dale Hoffman. True to his word, Dale comes back. He comes back the next day and the day after that, and on the 3rd day he brings a small notebook of his own, a tourist notebook with a Union Jack on the cover, purchased, James suspects, from a gift shop on the embankment. He is conducting what can only be described as a personal research project. James encounters him on day 2, near the hall's south entrance. "Back again," James says. "I've been thinking about it," Dale says. He has the focused, slightly wild expression of a man who has not slept quite enough because he has been thinking about something too hard. It's not just physical, is it? It's not a physical training thing. Because physically, I've stood still for 2 hours. I mean, not like that, but I've stood still. The problem isn't standing. The problem is he gestures at the hall, the crowd, the everything. The everything. How do you not react to the everything? "You practice not reacting," James says. "For how long?" "Years." Dale writes something in the Union Jack notebook. "Years," he says, as if filing it. On day 3, Dale arrives with Brenda and Tyler and a strategy. The strategy, as far as James can observe from a respectful distance, involves Dale positioning himself at the point in the queue closest to the southwest guard, and then, at the moment he draws level, turning to face the guard directly, squaring his shoulders and giving a slow, formal, entirely sincere nod. A nod of acknowledgement, of one person to another. Not a test, not a provocation, just a recognition. The guard does not respond. Dale nods again once and walks on. Outside, James catches up with him. "How do you feel?" James asks. Dale thinks about it seriously. "Like I said something that needed saying," he says, even if he couldn't say anything back. He pauses. "You think he felt it?" James thinks about Sarah Ockhafer on the folding chair with the cold tea. He thinks about what she said about hearing everything and not hearing anything. "Yes," James says, "I think he felt it." Dale nods. He writes something in the notebook. Brenda takes his arm. Tyler is looking at his phone, but he is smiling just slightly. In a way that suggests he has been watching and does not want anyone to know it. "British Museum tomorrow," Dale says. "British Museum tomorrow," Brenda confirms. They walk away down the embankment in the autumn light, and James watches them go. And he writes nothing in his notebook because he is busy simply watching, which is sometimes the more important thing. On the morning of the 4th and final day, James arrives again before dawn. He has come back every day. He told himself on day 1 that it was professional obligation, the journal article, the research, the institutional record. By day 2, he knew that was not entirely true. By day 4, he has stopped explaining it to himself at all. He is here because he needs to be here. This is sufficient. The queue, impossibly, is still long. People have been waiting 24 hours in some cases. There are reports of people who have queued, gone home to sleep, and come back and queued again, unable to complete the thing in 1 visit, unable to abandon it in 2. The organizers have announced that the lying-in state will close to new entries at a certain hour, but that everyone already in the queue will be admitted. The queue does not short. The queue, if anything, grows with the particular determination of people who know a door is closing and do not want to miss what is on the other side of it. James meets Commander David Hartley at 6 in the morning in the corridor behind the hall. David Hartley is 54 years old and has spent 30 years in various roles across the household division, and is the kind of military man who wears authority the way some people wear an old coat, completely naturally, completely without drama, in a way that makes you understand immediately that it has been there a long time and will go on being there. He has a cup of coffee. He offers James one. They stand together in the corridor and drink. "How are the teams holding up?" James asks. "Better than you'd expect," Hartley says, which is to say exactly as well as they're trained to. The young ones are doing particularly well. There's one, he pauses, and James understands from the pause that the name he is about to say is one of the names James has already encountered. There's a young Lance Corporal Akafer, first lying in state. She's been extraordinary. "I spoke to her," James says. Hartley nods. He is not surprised. He has the air of a man who is surprised by very little. "The hardest part isn't the standing," he says, unprompted, as if answering a question James has been building toward for 4 days. "Everyone thinks it's the standing, the physical element, the stillness, but you can train the body to do remarkable things if you give it enough time and enough repetition. The hardest part is that," he looks at the wall for a moment, the permission to feel it later. "Not during. You cannot feel it during. During, you are the ceremony. You are not a person who is experiencing a ceremony. You are the ceremony itself. The two things cannot coexist." He drinks his coffee. "But after, when you come off rotation and you sit down and you take the boots off and someone gives you a cup of tea, then it comes. And it comes hard sometimes." James thinks of Sarah Akafer's cold tea, the thing she puts somewhere to process later. "Do you give them anything for that?" he asks. "Support after?" "We do now," Hartley says simply and without defensiveness. "We didn't always, we do now." They stand in comfortable silence for a moment. 417 guards, Hartley says, over the 4 days, each doing multiple rotations, each one fully present every time. That's... He shakes his head slightly, not with modesty but with the genuine arithmetic of a man counting something he respects. That's an extraordinary number of hours of human beings choosing to hold something still so that other people can move through it, so that the grief has a container. James writes that down, so that the grief has a container. He underlines it. "The public," Hartley continues, 250,000 people through this hall, more if you count the route. And the thing that I keep thinking about, that I keep coming back to, is that most of those people will remember being in this room for the rest of their lives. They'll remember the light. They'll remember the ceiling. They'll remember standing in the queue and the moment they walked through the door and what they saw." He pauses. "And they'll remember the guards. They always remember the guards. Not because the guards did anything, because they didn't." James nods. "Because they stood still," he says. "Because they stood still. Because in a world that cannot stop moving, 4 people stood at the corners of something important and did not move, and everyone who walked past them understood, without being told, that this," Hartley gestures at the hall, the ceremony, the whole architecture of the moment, "that this deserved stillness. That some things deserve stillness." James walks the route one last time at midday. The hall is quieter now, not empty. Never quite empty, but the quality of the silence has changed. It is fuller somehow, as if 250,000 people have each left something behind, some small weight, and the hall is now holding all of it in that ancient stone and that hammer beam roof and that worn and shining floor. He stops near the catafalque. The guards at the 4 corners are ones he has not seen before. Fresh rotation, new faces, same absolute stillness. He looks at the one nearest to him for a long time. The guard's eyes are fixed at that point somewhere above and beyond. The chest rises, falls, rises again. James thinks about what Sarah Akafer said, about hearing everything and not hearing it, about putting it somewhere and processing it later. He thinks about Margaret Ellison at the railing with the river behind her. They hear everything. That's the whole point. He thinks about Raymond Catchpole in the queue, in his civilian clothes, standing with that particular organized posture of a body that has never fully stopped being a soldier, telling him about the smell of the crowd in the rain, and 50,000 people going quiet in a wave. He thinks about Dale Hoffman nodding at a guard on the 3rd day, slowly and formally and entirely sincerely, and walking on with Brenda on his arm and Tyler checking his phone, and all three of them carrying something out through the door that they had not carried in. He does not write anything in his notebook. He closes it. He puts it in his coat pocket. He puts his hand on top of it, through the fabric, the way you might put a hand on something you do not want to lose. Then he turns and walks toward the exit, past the queue that is still moving, still coming, still finding its way through the door and past the light, and past the four people standing at the corners of something important. Hearing everything, giving nothing back, holding the whole enormous weight of it absolutely still. Outside, London is going about its business. The queue stretches further than he can see. He walks into it and it carries him, and he lets it.